Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing great today and enjoyed these stories, and I'd like to share something quickly. Life can suddenly throw something really messed up your way where you'll have no warning whatsoever, and everything can get completely rooted from under you. You can be betrayed or whatever it is, and you can feel alone and lost in those moments. But it's important that if things like this happen, that you calm yourself down and think, it seems bad, but it's not as bad as my heart's racing to make me believe. And look around, and it's never as bad as what your mind is initially making it. It's here that you need to regather, collect, and figure out what you need to do to go forward and stay on top of your mind. It's so easy for you to fall into rumination and negative thinking when bad things come your way, especially when things are going well and you're not necessarily prepared for it. Sometimes life can go so well that you almost go a bit soft in your head, but that's a problem. In life, I think you have to have the mindset ready to deal with anything and always be trying to develop your mind and stay on top of your thoughts. It's a horrible feeling when things like this happen, and of course it can be really shocking, but the most important thing to do is just to keep going and stay positive and try and stay on top of your thoughts and make sure that you have lots of goals and different things to work towards. These are the things that will carry you forward and lend you away from overthinking so much, and make sure that you get out and see your friends and that you socialize. That's a really big part of it too. Make an effort to schedule seeing your friends and doing things that you enjoy with other people in your diary. It can really make a really big difference. And it's not going to be easy, but it won't last forever. Tough times may seem like they're going to be permanent, but trust me, they won't be. And even if you're not believing it when you're saying it, you have to just try your best to continue with it and trust the process. I think that's really important. So yeah, I hope you're all doing great. And if ever life throws something really random in your way and everything gets ripped out from under you, then the most important thing to do is just to keep going, stay positive and press forward. And make sure that you stay on top of your thoughts and seek therapy if you need it. So I hope you enjoyed these stories, and I'll speak to you all soon. I'd like to give you a little bit of context before that I get on with my part of the story. Now, this was a really weird time in my life. I was in my mid-20s and everything was going really well. I mean, my career was going excellently. It took me a long while to get into this position, but I was really happy for it. And I don't know, everything just seemed like it couldn't get much better. I'd married someone that I was really happy to be with, and interestingly, my family members didn't actually all know about this. It was basically a secret wedding we had, and we were going to have another one up in the future as a more formal one, but we couldn't end up getting that far. Basically, one day when I was at my parents' house with my wife, she just turns to me when my parents have gone away and said, "Oh, by the way, I don't think we can stay married together. Since I've married you, it's really felt as though that my life has changed for the worse, and that I've become almost that stereotypical wife. And all saving for a house, I never wanted to do that, even though it's a thing she'd agreed to do with me, which I thought was really odd." Now, she also said that, "Oh, by the way, we've also got to change where we live too," which is something that really surprised me. Because, of course, the marriage thing was pretty hard to deal with, but living away too, that was going to be even harder. I knew for a fact that I absolutely did not want to go back to my parents, because where they live, it's basically miles away from everything. And one of the nicest things that happened to me was moving out with her and just getting away from everything. But now I was faced with living with strangers, which is something I'm not really that keen on, and also losing my wife and becoming alone once again. Ah yes, my old friend loneliness. Well, I say that kind of retrospectively because it's not, but you'll find out more about that later, so yeah. Anyway, I was also about to start a new job, and literally I was only 2 days past renewing the rent contract with my wife for another year. So yeah, you can imagine how much it sucked. And the job that I was about to go into was not an easy one at all. It's not your typical job, it's quite a high pressured one. but it's something I'd been excited about for months, so I'd gone from basically counting down the days to instead feeling pretty confused about everything. It was my last day at work not too long ago, and I don't know, it just kind of felt like a surreal moment. Just everyone was coming up and hugging me, it was great, and instead of it being a beautiful moment, it turned out to be quite the opposite. It, yeah, it was a pretty weird feeling for me. I mean, I don't really know how to describe it, but yeah, that's that. And now at the moment, I live with my wife, and she goes out every so often and does whatever. But there's another part of this too I forgot to mention. She went for a trip away one day, and I questioned if she'd actually gone alone, and she said, "Oh yeah, I have," but in truthfulness, she hadn't. Turned out I checked her phone, and she had cheated on me and been meeting up with some other guy. The worst thing was, this was a guy that I met once. Yeah, my situation sucked and I wasn't happy, that's all I can say. So now, basically, I don't really know what to do. I'm going around seeing the odd friends here and there, but the problem is, very few of them actually understand me, and I can feel more alone being around people that don't have any empathy for my situation. Not in the sense that they have to care, but I don't like it when they just can't understand and they just immediately start talking about themselves and their own things, kind of oblivious to what's going on or what's right for me. Also, there's a few others I know too where they won't actually care about me. They'll just try and get me to do the things that they want to do because, they don't want to do it alone. But it kind of leaves you in this weird limbo land, I guess is what you'd call it. You're doing everything right, but it feels like nothing's going right around you. And there's some other things too that are kind of ticking you off. I mean, it's important not to give in to temptations and to stay on the straight and narrow, but my god, does that become difficult sometimes. So that was my predicament which I was in, and I wanted to kind of get away from people. Where I live is in a major city and there's always too many people around. I always have my habit of doing my night walks with my music, but the problem is there's constantly too many people around and I just can't get left alone, it feels like. Even if I'm talking to one of my friends on the phone, there will always be somebody who seems to come up to me asking for directions or something. Completely arrogant to the fact that I'm talking to others, so yes, that leaves me with the escape plan. So, I want to get back into nature and just get back to where I guess people can't hurt me. Nothing can hurt me really, but I'm being a bit melodramatic here, but you kind of get the point. There is the weaker thoughts and feelings of which are really trying to take over now, but I'm not letting them. I've been down and you can't take me there again, that's my mindset. So I set off on one particular day when I booked the day off work. I actually had the day off planned already to enjoy it. I did think I was going to enjoy it with my wife, or should I say ex-wife, but hey, here I was. So I start walking into the forest at around midday. Things are pretty okay. I'm just basically lost in my thoughts but trying not to be. I usually distract myself with music and whatnot, but this time I decided that I don't really think I should be doing that. I could probably spend my time better just trying to stay in my head and actually retrain my thoughts. Because of course my thoughts are quite negative at the minute and I don't want to fall victim to that. So I decided to go without music or anything. Another thing that I probably should have done is brought more water, but I didn't really think of this at the time. I probably filed for divorce about 4 days ago and yeah, it was a really weird feeling. The thing I didn't like is the fact that I knew I'm pretty much stuck with this person that I can't stand for at least the next month for the time that I'm getting settled into my new job. And every time I see her, it just reminds me of all the things that I didn't like of which happened. And I'm trying my best to remain civil. I'm trying my best to turn off the savage, the voice that bubbles up in my head every so often, but it was really difficult. And I was kind of failing, I don't know, it's a weird lost feeling. I control my breathing though every so often, and I find that this really helps and makes a big difference for me. I'm one of those people where I can make myself win, or I can also make myself lose in my head if I'm not being too careful, so I decided to choose the winner's path. Now, I'm very glad to say that there was nobody around at this particular time. Now, I was trying to take my mind off other things too, like work commitments and other projects I needed to complete before starting the job. I mean, yeah, I could book 4 days off, including the weekend, and not really be able to enjoy it because of work commitments. I was supposed to get a raise soon, but I knew it was going to be difficult for it to come through, but I suppose everybody has those problems, don't they? I remembered when walking, I kind of felt a bit fearless, which is something I haven't experienced for a few years. This one, however, was quite pleasant, and it actually come from supreme confidence. I've become an extremely confident person in the last few years, and that always serves me well. It's really weird though, it's almost like I've got most of the jigsaw complete, but not all of it. There always seems to be a piece missing for which I'm trying to put in there, but I never seem to be able to. I seem to be the great philosopher who can see what other people need to do, whereas I'm almost a stranger for myself in terms of advice, or at least listening to it. A lot of what I say seems to fall onto deaf ears when I'm talking to myself, and I feel like if my walls can hear me talk, they would tell me just shut up and be quiet. But anyway, I get further and further into my walk and I do feel very sweaty. I'm somebody who does tend to sweat quite a lot. I mean, even at the best of times in winter, I have to be careful about even wearing coats which are too heavy, because very quickly I can start to sweat and just feel horrible. I do have a new special deodorant I can use, but it doesn't really work, but the sweat was bothering me. Not just because of the fact I might smell, but I knew that I'd probably sweat through the deodorant which I was wearing, so obviously it's going to be quite annoying if I still had a lot further to go and I started to sweat. No issues, I just threw my shirt off temporarily. Now as I do this, it does become apparent how many bugs and insects are around, but they never seem to bite me really. Well, at least I think that until I can't stop scratching above my neck. It was a really weird feeling. It was almost like somebody had put something on me, but I couldn't quite take it off. I'm not too worried and just keep going. I'm trying not to wipe the sweat off because I know it helps cool you down. I go further and further into the forest now, and I feel quite comfortable. This is actually in an area that I'm not too familiar with, and I suppose that it served me well. It's around springtime, and lots of the greenery has returned to the trees and the surrounding nature. There's lots of moss and other things on the trees around me. It looks really cool. I can smell more and more of the plants and wildlife, and it starts to make me feel more comfortable and almost at peace and like I'm at home kind of. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is all I needed to get the clarity in my head. I just had to go for a nice walk and get away from everything. Every so often thoughts of my ex creep into my mind because we used to do little treks like this sometimes, and I'm trying my very best not to let it bother me because it can do so easily. Every time that I have a thought of her, I let it creep again to the back of my mind, almost like a breath in and out, or waves in the ocean. Now, as I'm walking, I do have a feeling that somebody else is here and with me. I'm not a spiritual person, but I do kind of believe that everybody has like a guardian angel. I've actually seen a psychic who told me that it was my great grandma, and I do believe she is with me, and that's what I think in this particular moment. Of course, I'm not delusional, I don't expect them to fend off every evil in the world, but I do kind of like the idea of her being here looking after me, so I just presume that she's with me. Every so often I can smell a smell of perfume, and it's pretty cool. This is something that's happened before. My dad apparently is more sensitive to things like this, and I keep on smelling a nice perfume smell, and I say hey and her name and I smile to myself. I don't know why, I just knew that in this particular moment that she was with me and that everything was going to be okay. Or at least that's what I keep telling myself. And I'll progress into a part of the forest which has kind of denser plants on the ground. The trees are always high and hard to see around, but these plants in particular seem to really be obstructing my view. I think this is okay though, and just keep pressing on further. I'm cautious not to go too far because I don't have any water with myself and I don't want to be out here alone. I just got a new mobile phone too, and I've had issues where that it doesn't always get signal. Also, some of my accounts seem to go public, which I'd set private for a while, then logging in again, and I just didn't like the feeling, almost like my privacy was breached. Around a corner, and I'm taking on some slight elevation, but it's not enough to cause any issues. I decided to stop for a little while, and I have to do up my shoelaces. One of my shoes is annoying me because it's kind of cutting into my ankle a bit. I tried to undo the shoelaces a few times, but it doesn't seem to make much of a difference. I'm kind of wearing them like, you know how people wear really expensive shoes with all the laces undone, but it doesn't seem to be making a difference. I decide that each step forward I'm going to try and block out the pain, but my god, that was difficult to do. Weirdly though, every time I look at my actual ankle it seems to be in good health and as though nothing's wrong with it. Now, I continue on this walk. The perfume smells left me, and I turn around for a second and see what appears to be a hiker. They seem to be just off in the distance. They're wearing some black overalls or something, and they just go behind a tree. I don't really think much of it and just think, well, I've got to pick up the pace to get away from these people now. I remember too that I really miss seeing my brother at this point. He was aware of everything which was happening and we made a few calls, but I really wanted to see him and meet up and do things with him, but he wasn't available, and that was kind of hard to deal with. It's almost like having a best friend that lives out of state where you see each other occasionally, but the days that you really need someone there at least with you, they're not able to, but I guess that's fine. I suppose that's how life goes. I remembered stopping for a moment because I noticed that my shoelaces were dragging a bit, and that's when I realised they weren't. It was someone coming from behind. I look around for a few seconds and said, "Hey." I don't get a reply, so I just presume that whoever this is being extremely rude to me, so I think, well, I'm just going to press on instead. I do feel a little bit uncomfortable now for the first time. I mean, I'm not a small person. I'm over 6 feet slightly. Not really that built, but quite strong, and I know some martial arts, so yeah, I'm not too bothered. I am worried though because I don't really know where I'm going and I don't want to get too lost out here. The last couple of weeks when things have went wrong, I found that I'm not my usual calm, confident self. My mind kind of goes into a panic more easily, and I don't know, maybe that's just from not sleeping so well, or maybe it's a host of other things, but it's a really weird feeling. So a little bit panicked, I just pick up the pace, and my shirt's been on for a while now. I've still got a jumper which is wrapped around me, and to be honest, all it served to do is act like a radiator, so I'm walking quickly away, but I also feel like I'm far too hot at the same time, which is quite a funny feeling really. I then realised stupidly that I still had my bottle of water in my jumper pocket. I can't believe I didn't realise it was here. I slam that thing within seconds and throw the bottle off somewhere. Now, the weird thing is, when I threw the bottle, I don't actually hear it hit the ground. Yeah, it was a plastic one, but it still had a tiny bit of water left, so it should have had some weight or something. I have a weird habit of not downing all of the water completely for some reason. I know it's stupid, but yeah, I don't hear the bottle whatsoever, and I'm a little put off by this. That's when I hear it. It's kind of like a laughing sound. Now, I've heard foxes before and other animals, and it kind of sounds just like those. I thought, God, if I didn't know what this was, I'd actually be quite scared at the minute. I am becoming a little bit paranoid. I kind of feel like I've done something wrong, and that I shouldn't be out here like this, but I don't know, it's almost like something took over me. I end up going up a bit further, and eventually I find some ledges to sit on, and I'm just staring off at the trees now. I kind of forget about my situation and relax a little bit, and I remember looking at the light coming through the leaves and thinking, well, I suppose life is kind of beautiful and it just depends how that you actually look at everything. I thought, I sure wish I had someone here to enjoy this with, and my mind starts to drift backwards again, which is quite annoying. I'm now thinking once again of the things that have gone wrong recently, and it's kind of stabbing at me quite a lot. So I keep going and pick myself up again. My eyes seem to be more fixated up this time, and I am a little bit worried about whatever the sound was behind me, but it soon stops. Now I get a little bit further down the trail when I hear something that I can't really explain. I hear somebody call out, which almost sounds exactly like my name in a male voice. I think this is really weird, and I decide that I must keep going. But I can't figure out where they are, or who it actually is. I half think that I've run into somebody that I knew, but I knew realistically that was really unlikely, especially because of the time of day of which this occurred, so I think this is odd. And that's when I see it. There's a person who looks like they've got to certainly be homeless not too far away, wearing all black, kind of looking at me saying, "Hey, stop, hey." This person was actually quite tall, and I don't know, they had a really weird look in their eyes. It almost looked like their eyes are far too pale. I can't tell when their clothes are from, but it doesn't look like it's in the last couple of years. I say, "No, sorry, I've got to go," and I just turn and start walking quickly. Almost military, I keep repeating to myself, "Watch your six, watch your six," as I'm walking away from who or whatever this person is. I'm looking over my shoulder every so often, but I'm trying to do that confident walk. You know, the ones that you're kind of taught to do. Well, not really formally taught, but you know you have to look confident to not look like a victim. Yeah, I was doing one of those. I was in such a weird headspace though that I was kind of happy about everything that was happening around me. Not in the sense of this situation, but I wasn't put off by the situation. I've been in some rough situations here and there, but this one felt a little bit different. Maybe it was because of last week's events, but I wasn't worried about what happened, what didn't happen. I didn't even feel like fighting if it come to it. I don't know, I just felt weird. I look around and I can't see the person, but I can hear some movement on one side of the trees. It kind of sets in a bit now that I'm in a situation I don't want to be, and I guess panic took over, and I feel my heart beat quicker and quicker. Now, it's at a point where that I'm still walking normally, but it almost feels like there's another force inside my body. I keep telling myself, "Stay calm and watch your six," and every so often I look behind myself, but the person isn't there. This gone on for probably another 20 minutes until eventually I stop to catch my breath. Now, I can continue going on further, but I realise that it's probably going to become dark, and I 100% don't want to be stuck out here with whatever this is. Now, kind of tapping into my bad situation, I become a bit fearless and just turn right around. I kind of march forward a bit like a train. I don't actually know why I did this. Again, I think it was just frustration of my situation and not really being bothered with what was going on anymore. I think, God, if this is really my time, then so be it. I can't be bothered now. And I just start marching forward. I do this for about, let's say 2 or 3 minutes until my adrenaline settles down a bit and I start to feel more tired. I kind of have the feeling like when you run in a dream, but not exactly. I've always had some injury on my leg and it's really annoying. Well, not always, probably in the last 5 years, but pretty much whenever I do certain kinds of exercise, my leg can really ache for ages afterwards, and I was a bit frustrated because the feeling comes back. I thought, well, I can probably make it out of here, but I'm probably going to get injured in the process, and again I get more annoyed. I can then hear movement again, and I now realise that the person isn't far away. Initially I stop to listen to where they are, and I hear them swear. Then I hear another voice swearing too, not far off. I don't know exactly what they were saying, but I was thoroughly creeped out at this point, and I know that I need to move. Now this really scares me. I don't know why, it was just something about knowing that there's more than one of these people that unsettled me. I then say, "What do you want from me?" One of them says, "You're gonna give us everything." I don't know what that means, and I say I don't have any money. They say it doesn't matter, and I just scream, "I don't have my card, I don't have anything to give you." I was half tempted to tell them about what was actually going on in my situation, but I decided that the best thing that I can do is just keep going. For some reason, I didn't let up and sprint now. I used to actually be really good at running, especially long distances, but since going to the gym, I've actually got quite good at sprinting too. I got it from the sports that I used to play, but for whatever reason, I just didn't want to do it. Again, I think I was probably far too lost in all of the rubbish from within the week, but I don't sprint. I also stupidly don't look around. I'm just confidently walking away, almost like I'm in control of the situation, but obviously I'm not. That's when I feel it. Something grabs onto the back of my jumper. Within a split second, I've turned around, punched something. Turns out that I've missed what I'm trying to punch for, but whatever was holding me let go. I then pick up a full sprint within a few seconds and start screaming out some profanities. There's one particular swear word that I always say really loud, and I suppose that because I've done it so often, I've probably trained my vocal cords in it, and I do it in this situation. I ended up sprinting. I'm not sure how long that I was sprinting for, and I don't bother looking back. I keep grabbing little branches and things that are loose and throwing them behind me, hoping to deter whatever's chasing me from doing it. I'm a little bit worried though, because I think, well, a male with my size, again, I'm not saying that I'm massive, but I'm not really small, shouldn't be in a situation like this unless that these people have really bad intentions. I've already told them that I don't have any money or anything to give them, so why are they still pursuing me like dogs? Now, I probably jogged and sprinted together for about another 5 minutes before I get really angry. I turn on the spot and scream a swear word once more and say, "Come on then," like I'm ready for them. I don't hear anything now, just silence, and for whatever reason, that was the worst part of the whole situation. It now dawns on me that I'm lost out here, and I have no idea where the people are pursuing me. So yeah, I just turn around and I almost accept everything. Weirdly, parts of my life start flashing through my mind, the good and the bad, and in that moment I felt lots of pride for myself for everything that I'd overcome. I start walking now and pick up the pace. Now, I know for a fact that a branch didn't snag onto me because when I've looked on my jumper, I can see that there's no holes or anything, so it's definitely a person that grabbed me. I lift up my shirt and to my surprise I can actually see a bruise where who or whatever it was had tried to grab on me so hard that it's actually bruised a bit. Now, I ended up power walking for probably another good 10 minutes before I eventually come to roughly where the start of the trail is. Now, I take one last minute to turn around and I scream again and I say, "Come on," swearing. I think an animalistic part of my brain had finally kicked into life, and maybe it was really the fight or flight in the latter come to light. But I did feel scared though a few seconds after that. I eventually make my way a bit further up and I'm able to escape from that forest. It was such a messed up situation. I go to check my phone and of course there's no internet. I think, well, that just sums it up, doesn't it? But then I feel a sense of relief knowing that I'm out of the situation and that I don't have to worry about my phone not having internet when I'm stuck out of there. It was starting to get cold now too, which was actually really annoying. It's actually become so cold that I have to start jogging the rest of the way home, which again was so annoying for me. I could tell that my body was exhausted and I was also trying to gain weight at this time, so I knew I could say goodbye to any weight that I could have gained. Yeah, that's how I was thinking. Nothing was really coming across logically. I did think about reporting this and everything, but the more I thought of it all, I kind of realised that they were probably just homeless people and that it probably wasn't as bad as it seemed, but I don't know. When I got home, I was faced with my partner again and I couldn't be bothered to actually talk to her. I kind of explained briefly what had happened, but she just didn't seem to understand. I decided that I should just save the details for myself and that she kind of didn't deserve to know almost. Now, it wasn't that long ago that this situation happened to me, and I haven't really told anyone about it, to be honest, other than you guys, but I don't know. Let me know what you think it could have been, because to be honest, I really don't know. I love to tell myself that it was probably just homeless people trying to rob me, but the thing is, I have contactless on my phone. I don't carry a bank card. I don't see the point, it's just another thing for me to lose. But I wonder what would have happened if they weren't happy with just taking my phone. Why were they out there? And why were they so quick to get aggressive and try and grab me? Yeah, it was pretty weird. I mean, I like to think that there was nothing too bad from it, but I guess there kind of was. And it does actually worry me a bit that I was so lost up in my head that I didn't consider the situation for which I put myself in, so yeah, I guess if it's kind of like a learning point for other people, just please try and always be aware of your surroundings and the situations which you're entering, because I know when you're emotionally reacting to things, it's easy to lose sight of what's in front of you, but sometimes that can be the most important thing for a variety of reasons. Now, slightly outside of Appalachia, me and a few friends were walking back to my house when we heard a long scraping noise. Now, this was pretty weird. I was actually convinced it was a woodpecker at first, but it didn't sound like much of one to me. We tried to take a closer look, but all of a sudden we get this dark energy and feeling like we're being watched. Now, we walked back to my home and we felt like this weird energy and feeling of being watched the whole way home. But then the noises stopped, but we keep feeling like we're being watched. I don't know what this could have been. I was tree planting near Smithers, BC, about an hour and a half into the mountains on dirt roads. I tried my best just to forget the incident occurred, as I simply could not find a way to rationalize what happened, and I don't care if people believe me or not. It was almost midnight and I was trying to sleep in my tent. Now, my tent was near a bunch of standing dead trees that would creak when the wind picks up. A very loud and distinct sound happened though. Now on this particular night it was dead silent and still. I started to hear sticks cracking and steps being taken that slowly got closer over the course of about 15 minutes. It was loud enough that I was certain there was a bear approaching my tent. It got so close that it had to be no further than 15 feet away from the tent, crackling sticks and paddling around the forest. I decided to yell out very loudly, and there's silence. I was answered with nothing but silence again. No sound of a creature fleeing or doing anything at all. I sat there, completely scared to move, trying to rationalize what I'd heard, but there was no conclusion. After about 20 minutes of dead silence, I hear the eeriest, most unnatural, unexplainable noise that I've ever heard. It was the exact same timbre and volume and just basically the same sound as the trees outside were creaking. But instead of a regular creak, it began, then held the same note for 5 seconds or longer. It sounded like an unnatural drone that was obviously not a tree. That was not a hint of wind or any other things that could have possibly made this. I got barely any sleep the next day and just had to forget about it. I didn't ever make the connection that skinwalkers are known to make sounds like this until a few weeks ago. This happened in July of last year. I wonder if anybody else has had anything similar happen to them. This happened in 2021 with me and 3 of my friends when we decided to go out to a late night walk through the forest in Mission, BC to a small lake at night. We were at the bushes before the train tracks and we were standing they're contemplating whether it is actually a good idea to move forward, going further into the forest past the train tracks. For some reason, we stood there and two of my friends felt uncomfortable that they're actually going anywhere. And I, on the other hand, with my other friend, are feeling rather adventurous, but eventually we all decide to walk. So we stood there, and we were like, why don't you guys want to go in? You could just tell that they felt uncomfortable and wanted to leave. So we waited a bit longer, then both me and my other friend felt uncomfortable and decided it's not a good idea to go. Then we hear things in the bushes a couple of feet away, like something stepped on a branch, but there was no other sounds whatsoever. It wasn't a small branch either, like a thick one, and it wasn't like a snap, it was like a really loud crash sound, like something really big was there. No sounds of bushes moving or anything like that. Now, we all decided it was no good. Felt like we're being observed by something or someone that's possibly dangerous, and we took off back to the truck immediately and left. It was probably just an animal, but it was quite weird. Also, the potential of being stalked out there is pretty scary, especially because there's a group of us and whatever this is wasn't scared. That's the weird part for me. I'm a search and rescue worker. Now, I'm also somebody who loves to be in the great outdoors, and something that I volunteered for was doing some nature tours. We get a lot of tourists where I live, so I didn't have an issue doing this. Where I live, it's very popular even during the winter months, so it meant often that tourists would need some guidance, and just you had to make sure they didn't get lost basically. Now, one area that we went to, you had to take the cable cart things up to the top of a hill, and that was no issue. I was friends with the people that worked there and we had a really good relationship, and on this one particular day we were getting things ready. You had a beautiful view of the city near where I lived from on top of this hill thing, and the tourists would always love to go here. You had to be careful because they're pretty stupid sometimes and they'd actually go almost off the edge. Another colleague joining me this particular day was a ranger, and he told me that he noticed something odd. He saw some footprints which went further off of the normal trail, but they didn't look right. They kind of looked too big. I mean, I know a lot of people wear snowshoes up here, but it almost looked like it was covered in some kind of material. I can only describe it as something fluffy, but not, almost like it was more porous. Also, the strides were massive, and it didn't look right. Apparently there'd been some reports of some kind of weird person further out from the rest of the group earlier, wearing a white, kind of grey colour coat. They only ever saw the silhouette, but they said that this person looked pretty big. So me and my buddy go to investigate, and we don't have to make it too far. We realise that these tracks are going deep into the woods where we never usually go. And after about 5 minutes of following them, we notice that there's a really bad smell around here, almost like somebody or something had died. I start to panic a little bit, but I feel reassured by the fact that my friend is literally right next to me, and he's had more experience being a ranger than I have a search and rescue worker. Now that was when I saw it. I locked eyes with I don't know what. Now these eyes were probably about 7 or 8 inches apart, and they're a good 8 feet or so above the ground. I can only describe what appeared to be a Halloween mask, but something with orange glowing eyes was staring at me, and I didn't have to tell my friend about what I was seeing as he saw it too. I locked eyes with whatever this is for probably about 10 seconds before I heard the most deep growl that I've ever heard in my life. The next thing I knew, my ranger buddy grabbed my hand and we're hiking back in the opposite direction that we come from, constantly looking over our shoulders. We eventually made it back to the station and decided to close off the area for the day. In fact, we closed it off for that whole weekend. We radioed in what we'd seen to some other towers, and they said they're going to keep an eye out for whatever this was. The local law enforcement didn't want to know when we tried to explain this to them, thinking that it was just us playing a prank on them, but I still don't know what I saw to this day. I can only describe it as kind of like a Yeti thing, but I don't believe in those, but I don't know what it could have been. I'd probably spent too long out in the woods because I'd become incredibly comfortable out there. Every so often, I'd hear or see something that I couldn't explain, but it never really unsettled me. Now, I really had a knack for being out in the winter. I don't know why, I just really liked it. There was something about being out and the added silence that really was something I found peaceful. What made it all the better was the fact that I had a beautiful house that my family owned that was surrounded by miles and miles of forests. Now this house was quite some ways up a hill, and it was somewhere that I loved going to. It wasn't necessarily modern, and you actually had to use a stove fire, I think that's what you call it, to stay warm. We'd even use candles sometimes to stay warm up there. Now, I remembered when I was a bit younger something weird that happened. Now, I'm going to have to tell you this from my dad's perspective because I don't really remember it clear enough, but this is what my dad said happened. So we're staying up there during one winter, just because the place is so beautiful, and to try and have a nice family holiday. I was working really hard at the time and I needed the break and clearness, so we headed up there. The first couple of days were absolutely beautiful, and it gets to Christmas Eve. We have all of the presents set up and a really nice Christmas tree, and this is a real one, not like the modern ones. We even have the fire going and it's really peaceful. My two kids at the time were really excited to see Santa Claus. There's my son and my daughter. Now, my daughter was a little bit younger but still believed in Santa, even does partly to this day. Well, that's a lot more than my son, which is why my story gets a bit weird. So we put the kids in bed and it's just me and my wife laying there happy. Now, suddenly, my son runs in the room saying, Daddy, I saw Santa Claus out the window. Now, obviously realizing something's completely wrong, I get up. I realize that my son's not just going to make this up and I kind of panic a little. I run out to the window and I don't see anything. He says, look, Santa's gone off running. I open the window and put my head out and ask my son to show me where. I quickly close it and grab my son and run out the front. And, what do you know? There's a silhouette of somebody running off in the distance into the tree line. I scream out, hey, but they don't respond. They seem absolutely panicked and maybe injured. They were running a little weird. From what I can make out, they're very old and have quite a long beard, and there's not much else I can see. But this definitely wasn't Santa Claus. I chased off after them as quick as I could, but they must have really took off because I never saw them again. I wasn't stupid enough to get lost in the woods trying to track this person down, but I realized something's really off. I eventually go back to my worried wife and son and I tell them not to worry about anything. I then say, oh, Santa's come too early, almost like a joke trying to get my son to calm down, but it actually works. The daughter was also a bit upset but much happier after realizing this. In their minds, I just chased off Santa and I was a monster, but in my own, I knew what happened. I asked my son to describe what happened and he said he was laying there half asleep in bed when he opened his eyes and saw Santa Claus staring at him through the window. I said how long was he there, and he said he doesn't know, but it must have been a while because he felt like somebody was there for quite some time. Apparently, he thought that maybe Santa was near and decided to pretend he was asleep for a good 10 minutes, just in case Santa was actually there about to deliver presents. Yeah, you can imagine how that made me feel, and I called the authorities, but unfortunately they didn't find anybody. So yeah, That was my dad's story, and now I find it as creepy as heck. From my perspective, it was literally just me waiting to see Santa, but looking back on it now, it really makes me feel sick. I hate the fact that things like this happen. I still have no idea who that person is, and honestly, sometimes when I'm out there on my own, I hope I find them just so I can give them a good beating, but I'll never know who it was, but it still freaks me out. Nothing too similar to that's actually happened since, and I'm quite grateful for that. Other than that, I had a really good childhood. Now, there's one other pretty creepy thing that I know that happened from when I was a bit younger, also related to this. Now, I had a friend who I'll just call Jack for the sake of this, who was my best friend at the time. Near Jack's house, and not too far from the house that we had, there was a really nice wooded area. This was kind of secluded away from everything, and I don't know, it just had a certain vibe to it, and we had lots of fun there. One of our favourite things that we could do was climb up a really big old tree. I remembered we'd do it sometimes if we heard other people, just because we didn't want them to intrude on us and make us jump, or I don't know, we were just kids, so we were a little bit worried. Now, earlier in the day, we'd been doing some stupid things. We'd been stealing some firewood off somebody's front drive. Now, when we'd run up on the driveway, one of us would keep lookout and the other would go and grab the logs. I don't know why we did it, we literally had no use for these things, but I guess it's just a thing to do at the time. Now, we didn't actually like the people who lived here, mind you, because every time we'd play games outside, they would get really angry. I remembered one time we were playing catch or something and the ball went into this person's yard, and this old man comes out, grabs it and literally doesn't give it back again. I mean, we're literally kids having fun and he can't stand it. Like he had nothing better to do other than this. Well, hey, now was time for our payback. Now, after getting as much wood as we could pretty much handle without making it too obvious that we'd taken them, we head back to the tree. Now, we played a few games until we heard a voice screaming. They were calling out, hey, I know you're up there. Hey. So, what did we do? We panicked. I ran behind the big tree and immediately began climbing, but my friend Jack, he wasn't really a good climber, and he needed all the help he could get. He started climbing up the tree and actually got a cut on his leg and started to panic, and I had to go down to rescue him. Eventually he was okay and decided to keep going higher. I told him not to and that it's a bad idea, but he didn't listen. I was in quite a good point, just out of sight where I could peer around the tree and see what was happening up ahead. Now, there wasn't too much happening up ahead at first, so I actually grew relatively relaxed at this. Now, not too much longer later, we can hear the voice, but much louder. They say, hey, I know you're here, what are you doing? But this voice sounded different. It sounded far too deep. I also saw a couple of flashlights. It was now getting a bit dark and I thought, God, I'm really in trouble now, and I really hope that my parents don't find out. Yeah, it wouldn't have been the best if my dad had found out, because he actually warned me about playing out here, so I wasn't looking forward to potential consequences, and at the same time, I was willing to do everything I could to try and minimize the risk of getting that whooping off my dad. So I'm playing it safe. Now, they ended up coming literally to the base of the tree. One of them whacks on the base of it saying, come on, we know you're out here. And my heart falls through my chest. All they have to do is look up just a little bit and they're gonna see me. And I can now see that it's a group of angry adults. Until eventually they make their way. Now, we stayed up this tree for God knows how long, and I didn't make any communication with my friend. I knew it was a bad idea because it's going to be obvious that we're talking, and I didn't know if these people were waiting for us. I was 100% certain it was the people annoyed about us taking their wood. Also, when they left, I could see them carrying things which I'm pretty certain was a firewood, but I thought, well, at least I avoided my dad. But the problem is now that it's growing very late, and I'm gonna get in much more trouble if I'm not home in time. I knew the best bet now was to say that I was gonna stay at my friend Jack's house. Now, this is something I've done a few times before and that I actually really enjoyed during sleepovers. But today I didn't really want to have to do that if I didn't have to, but it was looking that way. Now eventually I say, Jack, Jack, and I don't hear a reply, so I realise that something's off now. I say, Jack, come on, where are you? And I look up the tree, and I realise that he's gone. Thinking, how could this guy have possibly gone further? I start climbing higher and higher, until I realise that he's not there. I think, God, did he get captured? In my mind, this is the last I'm ever going to see of my friend, and I actually feel a little bit scared, and this is the first true panic set in. I eventually make my way down, and I actually hurt myself getting off the tree. I didn't judge the fall very well, and my God, I don't know how I didn't break my legs. I was quite frustrated at myself for losing my friend, and I knew I had to look for him. Now, I sat down, and it's very dark. I take one step and I hear a loud sound, which immediately I realise is a frog, and I calm down a bit. I realise just how jumpy I am now, and how unsettling everything's making me. It was getting a little bit cold too, and I wasn't really dressed too well for the weather. Now I start making my way in a new direction that I haven't been before. This is through the very high grass. Now, I make it quite a long way along here, saying, Jack, Jack, where are you? Jack, I need you now. We have to go. Now the last thing that I wanted to do was go out of here without my friend, but I really don't feel like I have much of an option now. I think, God, why couldn't we have just done something normal, and kind of cussed myself out for a bit. I continue walking, wading further and further through this tall grassy stuff until eventually I hear someone whistle. I drop down really quickly and turn back to see what it is. Now, initially I see somebody waving, but because of the fear, I can't really see clear, and it takes a second for my eyes to adjust. Then I realise it's Jack, in the tree. He says, hey, it's clear. I say, Jack, for God's sake, how did you get up there? I was just there. And he said, hey, look, I come down, just come back quick. Don't move another inch forward. And I don't. I then start coming back the way that I went, and I realise that it's quite soggy ground around here. Now, I didn't realise how much ground I'd covered, because it takes me quite a long time to end up catching up with my friend again. He says, hey, come here, no seriously, and I kind of think that I'm in danger again, so I start up the tree. I eventually make it to where my friend is, and I say, where did you go? And he says that he couldn't hear from me, and he was worried that they had done something and couldn't spot me where I was, so he climbed down as quietly as he could and searched the area, then come back again. I tell him my perspective, and he says I don't know how we didn't see each other, and I agree. He then says, look, I need you to come up here. I'm a little hesitant because I don't want to climb up the tree anymore because it looks dangerous, but he offers to go down, giving me enough space to get up there appropriately and safely. I do that, and eventually make it to almost at the top. As I do so, a large part of the tree falls down and makes a really loud sound, and I'm clung there. I don't want to move any further up now because it's not stable, so instead, I just look around. Now, I then see what my friend was pointing to from further down. Just up to the edge of where the grass is, there's a huge drop. Now, this is almost a cliff like I've never seen before. It's just pure blackness down the edge. I let out a large gasp and say, how did we not see that before? And Jack then tells me that I was literally only probably 2 steps away from going off the edge into the water below. Now, I know for a fact that I would have died or would have really seriously hurt myself and probably fell unconscious had I have kept on going any further. What really creeps me out about that situation is just a feeling of realization that I was 1 step away from being really hurt, but honestly having no idea about the danger that I was in. I was really mad at myself, like honestly, but eventually we both make it down again safely, and we decide to go and check how much of the wood they've actually taken back. Jack and I then half joke about actually taking it back again, but we decided to leave it for another time. Now weirdly, We get to the exact spot where the wood should be, and it does look different. We have a look around until eventually we find the pile. Now weirdly it was exactly where we'd left it before, but also there was an old busted out computer now next to it. You could see that somebody really had a go at it with a hammer, which we thought was pretty bizarre. We then realised that this is probably what the group of guys were after that we saw earlier, and we suddenly realised that it wasn't the old person that we didn't like or his friends trying to get the wood back, and that gave us chills. Now we're so unsettled by the realisation of this that we actually decided to put the wood back where it was, just so, I don't know, everything is as it seemed before. We kind of want to remove our traces and steps of ever being there, but we realise that it's not really possible. But we still do it anyway. We didn't really say many words and just gave our goodbyes, and I started the long walk home then. I actually lived on the other side of town where we are, and it took quite a while to walk back. Now I can tell you that that walk back was one of the most scary of my life. I was constantly looking around, half expecting them to find me again, and I was actually planning escape routes in case that happened. There was two ways that I could go back. One was through a main road and the other was near a big hill, and I decided to go through the big hill. It's just a bit more of a stealthy option and it just made me feel safer, and safety is really important at this time. I eventually made my way back home and I get berated off my parents for coming home so late. I say I'm really sorry and that I was going to sleep over at Jack's house, but I forgot our number to inform my mum and dad, and I got banned from going out to sleepovers or going to see Jack for a number of months, and that was quite frustrating. But I guess it was kind of the best situation out of what had happened, because I don't know who those guys were out there, or what they were doing with the computer, or who they were looking for, but the whole situation just seems messed up. I'm just glad, like really glad that I didn't fall. And another side note thinking of it is, if I had fell not expecting to fall, I probably would have especially got hurt because I wouldn't have been able to brace myself whatsoever. You know, if something falls on you and you don't see it, it hurts so much more. Yeah, just like that. Now, those are probably the most creepy experiences that I had during my childhood. Now, I have to bring you to one much closer. Now, this happened around 2 years ago, and it's something that I still think about to this day. Now there's a few different cave systems near where this house is, and they're ones that I often didn't explore. Now there's obviously good reasons for this because it can be incredibly dangerous, but I don't know, it can kind of be enticing sometimes. And one time that I was staying up at the house on my own, I decided to go and investigate. Now, it was my fault for not having enough of a structure and kind of losing focus on what was actually important in life, and I thought, hey, why don't I go and explore a cave that I know is kind of creepy and might be an interesting thing and give me something to talk about. And yeah, I got those things, but not how I wanted. So I set off one morning. It was pretty cold out and there was actually snow everywhere still at this point. Now that wasn't too much of an issue, and I actually had some snowshoes designed just for this. Now they were still a little wet from the previous day, but that doesn't matter. There was lots of different kinds of trees and shrubs around me, and there was kind of a few natural paths and breaks in the trees. Now there wasn't any snow falling currently when I set off, which is a good thing, and everything is silent, and that's just how I like it. Now I don't have to get too far until I'm just to where the cave should be, and what do you know, bingo, I find it. Now this cave is basically a big hole in the ground, which I guess most of them are, but there's not kind of like a doorway. There are some rocks which kind of separate it into 3 sections, and I decided to gauge how deep it is. I grab a rock and throw it in, and I don't hear it at first. I realise that it's a pretty deep one, but there's pretty good ways to get down the sides of it, which I actually follow. Now, this cave is quite a lot warmer than outside, and I kind of realise why the cavemen like caves. I had done some caving before, so I wasn't too worried about setting off now. I also had my torch attached to my head and a few spare ones, which are really important for when you're doing anything like this. When I went in, I thought I was going to find all kinds of cool things, but there wasn't really too much to see at first. Now, I knew this cave wasn't supposed to be too deep, and I liked that. I go to one area, and I can see some really beautiful rock formations which are coming up and dripping down from the ceiling, which I found really nice. Now, there were actually some spiders that I saw, and I really don't like them, so I decided to continue on. I'm not going to go too far because obviously I'm on my own and I don't want to get lost in here. Now, that's one of the stupid things that I'd done, was I didn't inform anybody of what I was doing. I remembered that at one point there was a very strong and sudden wind chill, which I thought was really odd. I hadn't felt anything like it, and I don't know why it just come on so suddenly. Now, this was really cold, like noticeably colder than the surrounding parts, which I thought was bizarre. Now, I continue on anyway, and I come up to an area where I see something odd. There's a chain swinging on its own. I don't know what this chain is or why it's there, but it's almost self-powered. I wondered whether it was actually a machine or something that somebody had left in there, because I knew nobody else was there but me. I do a quick hey, hello, and I don't hear anything. I think this is pretty bizarre, and I call out again, almost convinced that there should be somebody out there other than me, but no, there's no one. Again, I think this is rather bizarre, and I continue on. I'm almost at my endpoint now, and I don't want to go much further, and I basically avoided the chain, thinking that it's something that could be explained. Now, at the time, it didn't hit me how creepy that was, and how bizarre it was that that was left in there. I just thought some other hiker had been in there, or explorer like me, and just left some of their equipment there swinging, and I thought maybe it was somehow motorized. I guess I just wasn't thinking. Now, eventually I hear a whipping sound, and I hear that it's coming from behind me. I turn around again and realise that it's from that chain that I heard before. I'm now convinced someone's in here with me, and I realise that they may need help. I then turn around and go to where the chain is, and it's still swinging like before. I then go up to it, and weirdly, I can see that there's nothing to make it swing. I hold it for a second and let go, and it suddenly stops. Now, at this point, it wasn't swinging so fast, but I was almost certain that it shouldn't be moving like this, and I'm looking for someone who might be in danger or need help. I call out hey, and again am just met with echoes. I use my other torch now so I can see a bit better, but there's still no one. Annoyingly too, I actually cut parts of my head on one of the things hanging down from the rock formation above me. It's not a big cut, but it's annoying because I'm worried it's going to turn septic. I then decide that now is probably a good time to get out of here and start heading back, when I hear something. It almost sounds like a low growl, but it's only for a second and I can't be too certain at what I'm hearing. I think this is pretty weird, and I think maybe there's an animal that's got lost in here. Ah yes, that would make perfect sense. An animal's probably come and brushed it, and I've just been in here creeping myself out. And I decide to continue. I think that I'm getting out here and I don't have any time for it. But then I hear the sound again, though this time it sounds more like a moaning. Now, I'm not entirely convinced that what I'm actually hearing, it kind of sounds like an animal, but it kind of sounds like a person too, so it's pretty hard to figure out what this is. I'm trying to figure out where this sound is coming from, but it's really hard to approximate because of the echoes, until eventually it grows a bit louder and I know where it is. It's somewhere in the inky blackness, not much further ahead. Now I've got to figure out what this is. The curiosity was kind of killing me now, and I take my first few steps towards it. Now, the first I noticed of it is when a shadow was cast from my torch. I could see the silhouette of something. Not exactly certain if I wasn't looking at another rock formation. I edge closer, and that's when I see it. Hunched over, in the shape of an elongated human body, is something almost in a praying position. I look up and lock eyes with whatever this thing is, and I see some piercing dark red glowing back at me as my flashlight illuminates whatever this thing is. Now, in a split second, I turned around and was bolting out of there as quick as I possibly could. Now, I didn't have much time to think. I was like a trapped person with a wild animal trying to get back desperately. What I saw I can only describe as a half-human, half-statue, half-creature which was really too long and skinny. It had some human features, but I couldn't make out much of a mouth or anything. Just these absolutely disgusting, demonic-looking eyes. Now, I've done lots of research since trying to find anything similar to what I saw, but I just can't find anything. Now, of course, none of this is going through my head while I'm sprinting back, but I just have this terrible feeling. You know, like when you're running in a nightmare and you can't get away quick enough and your legs aren't moving? Well, imagine having that but also being trapped in a cave and trying not to get lost. Yeah, it was really frustrating. I looked over my shoulder every so often and I can't see anything, but every so often, ever so faintly, I can hear a weeping sound. I don't know whether it was getting closer, and I don't know where it was coming from because of the echoes, but it was sure as heck there. Now, in my desperation, I get stuck. I get my arm half wedged in one of the lodges on the way, and I can't get it out. I keep pulling and let out a kind of quiet muted scream as I'm punching my arm, desperately saying, no, 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 come on. I keep glancing back every couple of seconds just to make sure whatever that thing is hasn't moved an inch, but I can't see it. I keep punching until eventually I free my arm and unfortunately cut it in the process. I got a nasty gash on my forearm, and again I'm worried about it getting infected. I've now made it about 3/4 of the way out of the cave, and I'm starting to see some lights. The rocks are incredibly jagged in this area, and I'm not going up the way you should. I'm going up the quickest way that I can, and I pay the consequences. As I start climbing the final ascent, some of the rocks fall off, and again I cut my hand. I'm not too worried about it right now, and I'm just desperately trying to get away from this thing. I have to stop for one moment to catch my breath and get ready for the last pull which I need to get up, and that's when I hear it again, the weeping sound. It didn't sound closer than before, but it's still there. I give myself one last pull, and eventually I'm freed from the cave. I climb out as quickly as I can, and I'm constantly looking in all directions. I don't feel like I'm out of danger whatsoever, and I don't know if I'm going to get chased again, so I decide to keep moving quickly. I look back and I notice something dripping down, and to my horror I see blood. I don't know what it is or why it's there when I suddenly realise that it's my own blood, and that I need to get back to help quickly. So I continue going through the woods in the cold, feeling very scared on my own, trying to get back to civilization. I have quite a way to go, and I keep telling myself, you're so stupid, you're so stupid. Why on God's earth did you do that? Why did you go in there alone? What did you benefit from this? And I don't know, I just felt kind of a deep shame and fear. I don't stop looking behind myself, trying to figure out where this person or thing was. Now, I eventually make it back to the house, and I manage to patch myself up not long before I get into my truck and drive over to the hospital. They give me some shots and help patch me up even better, and that's because I wasn't sure exactly what I'd been cut on. They were worried that it was rusty metal or something like that, and all the other nasties. They asked the same question that I asked myself, which is, why did you go in there alone? I say I don't know, I just felt drawn to it, and I don't actually bother telling them about what I saw. Now, I eventually make it back to one of my friend's houses, and he asked what the cuts were about, and I just made up some excuse. I really didn't want to think about what had happened again. I really pained myself even doing it for this writing. Now, I don't know if the events that I told you about are somehow linked, or whether the creature that watched me through the window is the same one that I had seen in that cave, but whatever I saw, I know wasn't a living person like you and me. I don't know what it was, and it really haunts me.